I never believed old objects could carry something dark with them, at least not until I found the diary. 3 months ago, I visited a small antique market in a quiet town while traveling. Most of the stuff there was normal old clocks, broken lamps, dusty books, but one thing caught my attention on a wooden table in the corner. I asked the old man selling it where it came from. He stared at me for a moment and said quietly, "An old house that burned down centuries ago." Then he added something strange: "Most people who bought it brought it back." I laughed it off and bought it for $10. When I got home that night, I opened the diary. The writing inside was messy and uneven, like someone was writing in a hurry. The first page read, October 3rd, 1693, "It watches me from the corner of the room every night. I cannot sleep anymore." But the deeper I read, the stranger it became. Every entry described the same thing: a tall shadow standing in the corner of the writer's room. One entry said, "It comes closer each night. I hear its breathing when the candles go out." Another entry was worse: "Tonight it spoke my name." The entries became more desperate, the handwriting shakier, until the final page. "It stands beside my bed now. If anyone finds this diary, do not read it at night." Right after that entry, the rest of the pages were blank. I closed the diary and went to sleep. At around 3:17 a.m., I woke up suddenly. My room felt wrong, too quiet. Then I heard something. Breathing, slow, heavy breathing. I sat up in bed and looked around the room. Everything looked normal, until my eyes reached the corner. At first, I thought it was just the darkness, but then the shape moved. A tall shadow was standing there, perfectly still, watching me. My heart started pounding so hard it felt like it would explode. I rubbed my eyes thinking I was draining, but the shadow was still there. I grabbed my phone and turned on the flashlight. The corner was empty, nothing there. I laughed nervously and told myself it was just my imagination. But when I looked down at the nightstand, the diary was open. I was sure I had closed it, and there was new writing on the last page. My hands were shaking as I leaned closer to read it. It said, "You should not have read this." Then another line appeared underneath slowly, like invisible hands were writing it in real time. "Now it knows where you are." At that exact moment, I heard the breathing again. But this time, it wasn't coming from the corner. It was coming from right behind me. I turned around slowly, and what I saw standing beside my bed was too tall to be human. Its face was hidden in darkness, but its eyes were staring directly at me. And the worst part, the diary on the table flipped open again by itself, and one final sentence appeared. "After Officer Mark Delaney disappeared, the police department finally decided something was seriously wrong with the diary. 4 people had vanished. Every one of them had read it. Every one of them had written the next entry. This time the department didn't store it in the evidence room. They locked the diary inside a steel safe in the basement archives. The safe was sealed with evidence tape and placed in a room that no one used anymore. The idea was simple: if nobody opened the diary again, the curse would stop. For months, nothing happened. No strange noises, no new disappearances. The diary stayed locked inside the safe, untouched. Eventually the story faded into rumor. New officers joined the department who had never even heard about it, and one night, nearly 6 months later, a new clerk named Adam Reyes was assigned to organize old archive files in the basement. Adam was only 23, around 1:40 a.m. He was going through dusty boxes when he noticed the old safe in the corner of the room. It looked out of place. Heavy steel door, old evidence tape still hanging across it. Adam frowned. Why would a safe be down here? Curiosity got the better of him. He checked the logbook sitting on the desk nearby. Inside it was a single warning written in red ink: "Do not open safe 4." Adam laughed quietly. "Great. Now I definitely want to know what's inside." He found the key in the evidence cabinet. His hands hesitated for just a second, then he turned the lock. The safe door creaked open slowly. Inside was only one object, a small black leather diary. The same cracked cover, the same faded numbers pressed into the front. 1693. Adam picked it up carefully. 300 years old, that's actually pretty cool, he said to himself. He opened the first page. The entry from Samuel Harrow was still there. October 3rd, 1693. Something has begun watching me at night. Adam flipped through the pages. Fascinated, entries from dozens of people, across centuries, all telling the same terrifying story. The shadow in the corner, the whisper in the dark, the final entry. Then Adam reached the last page, and he froze. A brand new sentence was already written. June 18th, 1:44 a.m. The safe has been opened. Adam's chest tightened. That wasn't there before he could close. The diary, the pen lying beside the page, rolled forward and began writing. Curiosity always wins. Adam backed away from the desk. What the hell? The basement lights flickered once, then twice. Then the entire room went dark. Only the small desk lamp stayed on, and in its dim yellow glow, Adam slowly turned toward the corner of the basement. At first there was nothing there. Then the darkness stretched upward, like a tall figure rising from the floor. The same shadow waiting, watching, its head nearly touching the ceiling, its pale eyes glowing softly in the dark, behind Adam. The diary wrote the final line. The watcher has waited 300 years. The story continues. Tonight, Adam's voice shook, stayed back, but the shadow didn't stop. It took one slow step forward, then another. The pen scratched across the page one last time. June 18th, 1:47 a.m. The new writer has finally arrived. Adam tried to run for the stairs, but the whisper reached him. First, right beside his ear, cold, calm, unavoidable. Your turn to write. The next morning, the basement archive room was found empty. The safe door was still open. The key was still in the lock, but Adam Reyes had vanished. The only thing left behind was the diary on the desk, open to the final page. And beneath Adam's unfinished entry, another sentence had appeared. If you are reading this story, you are already part of it, because the shadow doesn't live in the diary. It lives in the story. And now, you know it exists. By the morning of October 7th, the police station had two missing persons connected to the same strange object. First, the man whose car was found on the roadside, then Officer Harris. Both disappeared within hours of reading the same thing, the diary from 1693. At first, the department treated it like a coincidence, but when they reviewed Harris's body camera from earlier that day, something strange appeared. The camera had recorded him opening the diary in his patrol car. At first, nothing unusual happened. He flipped through the pages, reading quietly, but then the footage changed. The camera suddenly filled with static, and for just a moment, a tall dark shape appeared behind Harris in the back seat of the car. The investigators thought it was a glitch, until they enhanced the footage. The shape had eyes watching the camera. That's when the department decided to send the diary to a local historian to learn where it came from. The historian's name was Dr. Lane Carter. She specialized in early colonial history, especially documents from the late 1600s. When the package arrived at her office, she was fascinated. The leather binding, the ink, the style of handwriting, everything pointed to the late 17th century. When she opened the first page, she read the name written inside, Samuel Harrow. Underneath it was the first entry, October 3rd, 1693. Something has begun watching me at night. Dr. Carter read for nearly an hour. Each page described the same terrifying thing, a tall shadow appearing in the corner of the writer's room, growing closer every night. But halfway through the diary, the tone changed. The entries became frantic, panicked. Then she reached the final entry written by Samuel Harrow himself. October 10th, 1693. The shadow told me the truth tonight. It is not a demon. It is a witness. Dr. Carter leaned closer to the page. The ink was darker here, as if the writer pressed harder with fear. It does not hunt people. It waits for someone to write about it. Because once its story is written, it becomes real. Dr. Carter felt a cold shiver crawl up her spine. She turned the page. The next entries were written in different handwriting. Hundreds of them. People from different years, different centuries. Each person describing the same thing, the shadow getting closer every night, until the final entry. And then another reader, another writer, another victim. Dr. Carter slowly closed the diary. That's when she noticed something strange. The last page was changing. New words were appearing. The pen lying beside the diary began moving slowly across the page. The entry read, October 7th, 9:14 p.m. The historian has learned the truth. Dr. Carter's hands began shaking. Then another sentence appeared. But knowledge does not break the curse. It only feeds it. The lights in her office flickered. She slowly turned her head toward the corner of the room. At first there was nothing there, just darkness. Then the darkness moved. A shape slowly stretched upward from the floor, tall, thin, and natural. Its head almost touched the ceiling, and its pale eyes were staring directly at her. Behind her, the diary continued writing the final entry. The shadow was never trapped in the diary. The diary was only the invitation. Every reader becomes the next storyteller. Dr. Carter backed away from the desk, but the shadow moved closer, one long step at a time. The final line began writing itself. The story has survived for 300 years. Because someone always keeps reading, the pen stopped. Silence filled the office. Then the shadow leaned closer to her and whispered the same words every reader hears. Your turn to write. The next morning, Dr. Carter's office was found empty. No signs of a struggle, no broken windows. Just one thing left behind on the desk, an old black diary. And on the final page was a brand new entry written in trembling handwriting. October 8th. If you are reading this, please stop. Close the diary. Do not continue the story. But below that warning, a final sentence had already begun writing itself, slowly, letter by letter, because the shadow is already standing behind you. The police report said the car had been sitting on the roadside since 3:30 in the morning. The engine was still running, the driver's door was wide open, but the driver was gone. No footprints, no signs of a struggle, just an empty road stretching into the dark forest beside the highway. When the officers searched the car, they only found one thing on the passenger seat, an old black leather diary. The cover looked ancient, cracked with age. On the front, faint numbers were pressed into the leather, 1693. One of the officers, a man named Harris, picked it up carefully. Probably just an old notebook, he muttered. But when he opened it, he realized it wasn't empty. The pages were filled with writing, hundreds of entries, different handwriting on almost every page, all telling the same story. About a shadow that watches from the corner of the room, about a curse that follows anyone who reads the diary. Harris laughed quietly at first. Looks like someone had a wild imagination, he said, but then he reached the last page, and his smile disappeared. The entry read, October 6th. The shadow has taken him. Now it waits for the next reader. Under that sentence, the page was blank, except for one thing. A pen was lying across the paper. The other officer joked nervously. Maybe you should stop reading that thing. But Harris shook his head. Relax. It's just a creepy journal. Later that night, Harris took the evidence home to finish paperwork. Around 2:40 a.m., he finally sat down at his kitchen table. The house was quiet. Too quiet. He pulled the diary out of the evidence bag again. Something about it bothered him. The pages felt warm, like someone had been holding it recently. He flipped through the entries again, stories about people disappearing, about the shadow growing closer each night, about the final moment when it enters the room. Then he reached the last page again. But something had changed. There was new writing. Words that hadn't been there before. October 6th, 2:41 a.m. The next reader has opened the diary. Harris frowned. I swear that wasn't there before. Then another sentence appeared, slowly. The pen on the page began to move by itself. Scratching across the paper, Harris leaned closer in disbelief. The pen wrote another line. He doesn't believe yet. A chill crawled down Harris's spine. Then the kitchen light flickered once and went out. The house fell into complete darkness. Harris grabbed his phone and turned on the flashlight. The beam of light swept across the kitchen. Everything looked normal until the light reached the corner of the room. Something tall was standing there, too tall, its head almost touching the ceiling, and its eyes were staring directly at him. Harris stumbled backward, knocking over his chair. The diary on the table flipped open again. The pen continued writing, October 6th, 2:43 a.m. The shadow has found him. Harris turned and ran toward the front door. But before he could reach it, the whisper came from behind him. The same whisper every reader hears. Calm, cold, right next to his ear. Your turn to write. The next morning, the police station received another call. Officer Harris never reported for duty. When they checked his house, the front door was still locked. The kitchen light was still on, but Harris was gone. The only thing left on the table was an old black diary, and the last page had a new entry written in shaky handwriting. October 7th. If someone finds this diary, do not read it, burn it. But below that warning, a final sentence was slowly appearing. Because once you read this, shadow already knows where you are. My entire body locked up when I saw the shadow standing behind my car. It was taller than the roof, its shape bent slightly as if it were leaning closer, trying to look inside. I couldn't move. The car door handle rattled again, slow, deliberate, like something was testing it. My eyes moved slowly to the diary lying on the passenger seat. The pages were turning again, by themselves, and no entry was being written. October 5th, 3:19 a.m. The watcher has followed in. It has waited 300 years for this moment. My breathing became shallow as the pen continued scratching across the page. The first man who wrote this diary believed the shadow was a demon, but he was wrong. It is something older, something that feeds on fear. I forced myself to look back at the window. The shadow was closer now, so close that its long fingers were pressed against the glass. 5. Thin shapes stretching across the window like dark branches. The glass began to fob from my breathing, and slowly a shape appeared on the outside of the window. A long mark, like someone dragging a finger across the glass. My heart nearly stopped when I realized what it was writing up my name, slowly, letter by letter. When the last letter appeared, the diary flipped to the final page. The pen began writing faster now. Every person who reads this diary becomes the next entry. Every night the shadow grows closer, until the final moment. My hands were shaking violently. I reached for the ignition key, trying to start the car, but before I could turn it, the passenger door slowly creaked open. Cold air flooded inside the car. I didn't remember unlocking it, but the door was open now, and something tall moved slowly into the seat beside me. I couldn't bring myself to look. The diary finished writing its last sentence. October 5th, 3:23 a.m. The shadow has finally entered. The pen rolled off the page. The diary closed. For several seconds there was only silence inside the car. Then I felt something brush against my shoulder. A long, cold hand. And a whisper filled the darkness. Not loud, not angry, just calm. Right beside my ear. It said only 3 words. Your turn to write. The next morning, police found my car parked on the side of the road. The engine was still running. The driver's door was open. But I was gone. The only thing left behind was an old black diary on the passenger seat. The last page had a new entry written in shaky handwriting. October 6th, I found this diary in the car. It says it's over 300 years old. I think I'll read a few pages tonight. I couldn't breathe. The shadow standing beside me was taller than before, so tall that its head nearly brushed the ceiling. Its shape was wrong, too thin, too long. And those eyes, they were the only thing I could see clearly in the darkness. Two pale shapes staring directly into mine. Behind me, the diary continued writing on its own. The pen scratched slowly across the page. Tonight, he finally sees me. The sound of the pen stopped. Silence filled the room again. I forced myself to move. My body felt frozen, but somehow I stood up from the chair. The shadow didn't move. It just watched me. I backed away slowly until my back hit the wall. Heart was beating so hard I could feel it in my throat. Then the shadow moved, not fast, not suddenly, just one slow step forward, and the temperature in the room dropped instantly. My breath came out in pale clouds. That's when I noticed something else. The diary had turned another page. Another sentence appeared. He thinks running will help. My eyes snapped toward the shadow. Then I ran. I didn't even grab my phone or my jacket. I just ran out of my apartment and down the stairs like something was chasing me. I didn't stop until I reached my car. The entire time I kept expecting to see that tall shape standing behind me. But the parking lot was empty. I drove for almost an hour before pulling over. My hands were shaking so badly, I could barely hold the steering wheel. Eventually, I convinced myself I had escaped whatever was happening. But when I finally gathered the courage to check my back seat, my heart stopped. The diary was there, resting quietly on the seat, water stains still covering the pages. I hadn't brought it with me. No, I didn't, but it was there anyway. And it was open again. Another entry had been written. He cannot escape the watcher. The curse began in 1693 when the first man wrote these pages. The shadow stayed with him until the final night. Then it chose another reader. My stomach twisted as I read the final line. The diary has waited 300 years for you. My breathing became shallow as I turned the page. There was one last entry being written slowly, letter by letter. October 5th. The shadow no longer watches from the corner. It no longer stands beside the bed. The writing paused. Then the final words appeared. Tonight, it walks inside the house with him. At that exact moment, my car door handle moved. Just slightly. Like something outside was trying it. I froze, slowly, painfully slowly. I looked toward the window, and in the reflection of the glass, I saw it standing behind the car, tall, silent, waiting. And the diary beside me turned one final page. The last sentence appeared. The final entry will be written when it finally steps inside. I didn't sleep that night. How could I? The thing I saw beside my bed, it wasn't human. It was too tall, its head almost touching the ceiling. And the darkness around it felt thicker than the rest of the room. The moment I turned on my phone light, it disappeared, just gone. But the diary was still open on the nightstand. And the last sentence was still there. The next entry will be written by you. I grabbed the diary with shaking hands and threw it across the room. It hit the wall and fell to the floor with a dull thud. I didn't care about the antique anymore. I just wanted it out of my sight. The rest of the night I sat with the lights on, staring at the corner where I had first seen the shadow. Morning finally came. Sunlight filled the room and everything looked normal again. For a moment I almost convinced myself that I had imagined the entire thing until I walked across the room to pick up the diary. When I opened it, my stomach dropped. There was a new entry on the last page, written in the same messy handwriting. October 4th. It stood beside my bed last night. It watched me breathe. I fear it has followed the curse again. My hands were shaking so badly I almost dropped the diary. I slammed it shut and decided right then that I needed to get rid of it. I drove to the edge of town where there was an old river bridge. My plan was simple: throw the diary into the water. When I got there, the river below was dark and slow-moving. I pulled the diary from my backpack and held it over the railing. For a second I hesitated. Then I let go. The diary fell into the river and disappeared beneath the water. I felt this wave of relief wash over me. For the first time in hours I breathed normally. I went home, took a shower, and tried to forget about everything. That night, I went to bed early. No diary, no shadows, at least, that's what I thought, around 3:12 a.m. I woke up suddenly. The room was silent, but something felt wrong again. Then I heard it, a slow dripping sound. Drip, drip, drip. It was coming from my desk. I reached for my phone and turned on the flashlight. And my heart nearly stopped. Sitting on my desk, completely soaked with river water, was the diary. Mud covered the edges and water dripped slowly onto the floor. But that wasn't the worst part. The diary was open again, and another entry had appeared. You tried to drown it, but the curse cannot be washed away. The shadow belongs to whoever reads these pages. It will watch you every night, until the final entry is written. My breathing became shallow as I read the last sentence. Because the final line wasn't finished, it simply said, October 5th, tonight, and then it stopped, like it was waiting. That's when I felt something cold brush against my shoulder. Slowly, I turned my head, and there it was again, the tall shadow, standing right beside me. This time, much closer. The diary page began to move, a pen rolled across the desk, and the final words slowly started writing themselves. Tonight, he finally sees me. I never believed old objects could carry something dark with them, at least not until I found the diary. 3 months ago, I visited a small antique market in a quiet town while traveling. Most of the stuff there was normal old clocks, broken lamps, dusty books, but one thing caught my attention on a wooden table in the corner. I asked the old man selling it where it came from. He stared at me for a moment and said quietly, "An old house that burned down centuries ago." Then he added something strange: "Most people who bought it brought it back." I laughed it off and bought it for $10. When I got home that night, I opened the diary. The writing inside was messy and uneven, like someone was writing in a hurry. The first page read, October 3rd, 1693. It watches me from the corner of the room every night. I cannot sleep anymore. But the deeper I read, the stranger it became. Every entry described the same thing: a tall shadow standing in the corner of the writer's room. One entry said, "It comes closer each night. I hear its breathing when the candles go out." Another entry was worse. "Tonight it spoke my name." The entries became more desperate, the handwriting shakier, until the final page. "It stands beside my bed now. If anyone finds this diary, do not read it at night." Right after that entry, the rest of the pages were blank. I closed the diary and went to sleep. At around 3:17 a.m., I woke up suddenly. My room felt wrong, too quiet. Then I heard something. Breathing, slow, heavy breathing. I sat up in bed and looked around the room. Everything looked normal, until my eyes reached the corner. At first, I thought it was just the darkness, but then the shape moved. A tall shadow was standing there, perfectly still, watching me. My heart started pounding so hard it felt like it would explode. I rubbed my eyes thinking I was draining, but the shadow was still there. I grabbed my phone and turned on the flashlight. The corner was empty, nothing there. I laughed nervously and told myself it was just my imagination. But when I looked down at the nightstand, the diary was open. I was sure I had closed it, and there was new writing on the last page. My hands were shaking as I leaned closer to read it. It said, "You should not have read this." Then another line appeared underneath slowly, like invisible hands were writing it in real time. "Now it knows where you are." At that exact moment, I heard the breathing again. But this time, it wasn't coming from the corner. It was coming from right behind me. I turned around slowly, and what I saw standing beside my bed was too tall to be human. Its face was hidden in darkness, but its eyes were staring directly at me. And the worst part, the diary on the table flipped open again by itself, and one final sentence appeared. "For weeks after Adam Reyes disappeared, the police searched everywhere, the basement archives, the building cameras, even the streets around the station, but Adam was never found. Just like the others before him, Samuel Harrow, the travelers, Officer Harris, Dr. Carter, Officer Delaney, all of them connected by the same thing, the diary from 1693. Eventually the department decided the diary was too dangerous to keep. This time they didn't lock it in a safe. They didn't store it as evidence. They decided to destroy it one cold evening. The chief of police took the diary to an abandoned quarry outside town. Only 2 officers were there with him. They placed the diary inside a metal barrel and poured gasoline over it. The chief looked down at the cracked leather cover one last time. 300 years of this thing ruining lives, he muttered. Then he struck a match. The fire exploded upward instantly. The diary burned quickly. The pages curled and blackened as the flames swallowed them. Within minutes, nothing remained but ashes. The officers watched until the fire died. Finally the chief sighed. "It's over." For the first time in months. Everyone felt relief. The diary was gone. The curse was gone. Or at least, that's what they believed. 2 nights later, a librarian named Clara Whitmore was working late in the town's historical library. It was nearly 2:30 a.m. She was cataloging a box of old donated books when she noticed something strange. At the bottom of the box was a small black leather journal. The cover looked old, very old, cracked with age. And on the front, pressed faintly into the leather, were 4 numbers. 1693. Clara frowned. "That's strange. I don't remember seeing this earlier." She opened the diary carefully. The pages looked ancient, yellow, fragile, and filled with handwriting. Hundreds of entries. From people across centuries, each one describing the same terrifying thing: the shadow, the watcher, the whisper in the dark. Clara's curiosity grew as she flipped through the pages. Then she reached the last entry. Her breath caught in her throat. The final page had writing that looked very recent. June 18th. "The diary was burned tonight, but the story cannot be destroyed." Clara whispered quietly to herself. "What story?" Then the pen resting on the page rolled forward by itself. The ink scratched slowly across the paper. A new sentence appeared. Every time someone reads these words, Clara froze. Her hands trembled as the writing continued. "The shadow wakes again." The lights in the library flickered. Once, twice, then the entire room fell silent. Clara slowly turned toward the corner of the room. At first, there was nothing there. Then the darkness began to move, stretching upward, becoming taller, forming the shape of a figure that nearly touched the ceiling. Its pale eyes opened slowly in the darkness, watching her. The pen finished writing the final sentence, and the story never ends. Right behind Clara, a whisper filled the quiet library. Soft, cold, unavoidable. This is the end of this story. Please subscribe to this channel for more stories like this.